I won $100 million and wanted to surprise my family at the mansion I built. But at the pool house, I heard my wife whisper, "That stupid old man will give us everything." Then a familiar male voice spoke, a voice that made my heart nearly stop beating. 30 years of trust shattered in a single moment. But they didn't know I had heard it all, and now I would show them the price of betrayal. Hello everyone, thank you for being here. Please comment and share. If you were in this situation, what would you do after discovering the truth? Important note. This is a fictional story for entertainment purposes. Any resemblance to reality is purely coincidental. However, the messages about trust and betrayal in the story carry profound, real-world values. I've always believed you build a life the same way you build a house, one brick at a time with calloused hands, and the stubborn faith that hard work will keep everything standing. My name is Sterling Wade, and for 58 years, that philosophy has been my foundation. I'm a construction contractor here in Nashville, Tennessee, and I've spent my entire adult life building things, homes, businesses, dreams. Some days when I stand on a job site with sawdust clinging to my jeans and the weight of a blueprint in my hands, I feel like I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. I married Celeste 30 years ago, back when I was still learning the difference between ambition and arrogance. She was beautiful, confident, and she had this way of making me believe I could build empires. We had one daughter together, Paige, and watching her grow up has been the greatest project of my life. 2 years ago, she married Preston Garrett, a finance guy with smooth hands and an easy smile. I'll be honest, I wasn't sure about him at first. He seemed too polished, too accustomed to getting what he wanted without the grit. But Paige loved him, and that was enough for me. Now Paige is just over 6 months pregnant, 26, maybe 27 weeks, and I'm about to become a grandfather. The first time she told me, her hand resting on that growing belly, I felt something crack open inside my chest. This baby represents everything I've worked for: legacy, continuity, proof that the Wade name means something solid in this world. My hands tell the story of my life better than words ever could. They're scarred from decades of job sites. A finger that didn't quite heal straight after a framing accident, and 98 calluses thick as leather from gripping hammers and 2x4s. Permanent grime under the nails that no amount of scrubbing can fix. Celeste used to joke that I could build a cathedral with these hands, and she wasn't entirely wrong. I've built plenty of things. Subdivisions in Franklin, custom homes in Brentwood, commercial projects downtown. But more than structures, I've tried to build a life based on values that matter: hard work, loyalty, putting family above everything else. That's why when my phone rang on an ordinary Tuesday afternoon, everything felt like it was finally clicking into place. I was in my truck, parked outside a lumberyard in East Nashville, reviewing next week's supply order. The number on the screen was unfamiliar, but something made me answer. The woman on the other end spoke slowly, carefully, like she was reading from a script designed to prevent heart attacks. "Mr. Wade, this is the Tennessee Lottery Commission. We need to verify some information regarding a ticket you purchased last Thursday." My first thought was spam. My second thought was that I'd somehow gotten tangled up in someone else's mess. But then she said the numbers 614 23 31 42 49, and I remembered. I'd stopped for gas on the way home from a site in Murfreesboro, bought a ticket on a whim because the jackpot had been climbing for weeks, and Paige had joked that someone had to win eventually. "Mr. Wade, I'm calling to inform you that you are the sole winner of the Powerball jackpot. The amount is $100 million. $100 million. The words didn't make sense at first. I heard them, but they felt like they belonged to someone else's life. Someone who wore suits and lived in penthouses and understood what numbers that big actually meant. And I sat there in my truck, staring at the dashboard, while the woman on the phone kept talking about claim procedures and financial advisors and wire transfers. My hands, these same scarred, calloused hands that had built half of Nashville's skyline, started shaking. When I finally hung up, I didn't move for a long time. The afternoon sun was beating through the windshield, and somewhere nearby a horn honked. The world kept turning completely indifferent to the fact that mine had just tilted on its axis. That evening, I drove home with my mind racing. I'd never kept secrets from Celeste, not in 30 years. By the time I pulled into our driveway in Green Hills, I'd made my decision. She was my partner. She deserved to know. I found her in the kitchen preparing dinner. When I told her about the lottery, her eyes went wide, her hand flying to her mouth. "Sterling, are you serious? 100 million. Every penny," I said, still trying to believe it myself. She threw her arms around me and I held her, breathing in her familiar perfume. "This changes everything," she whispered. "Everything we've dreamed of." We stayed up late that night talking about possibilities. The mansion in Belle Meade I'd been building for Paige, now I could finish it perfectly, spare no expense. Preston's struggling business, I could help. Paige and the baby, I could set up a trust fund that would secure their future. And Celeste, who'd stood by me through the lean years, who'd raised our daughter while I built my business. I could finally give her everything she'd ever wanted. "So I want to announce it at the gender reveal party," I told her. "Make it a celebration of new beginnings, the baby and our family's future." Celeste smiled, squeezing my hand. "That's perfect, Sterling. Absolutely perfect." For the first time in years, maybe decades, I felt complete. I felt like every long hour, every sacrifice, every choice I'd made had been leading to this moment. This is what I worked for. This is what it all means. I had no idea I was sharing the most important news of my life with someone who was already planning how to take it all away. A few days after the lottery call, we had dinner at my house, the kind of evening I'd always treasured, or at least thought I had. It was Friday night, 3 days since I'd told Celeste about the money. The kind of Nashville evening where humidity hangs thick after sunset and cicadas drown out everything else. I'd invited Paige and Preston over for dinner, something we did monthly. Celeste had prepared her signature pot roast, and the house smelled like comfort and tradition. I sat at the head of our dining table, the same oak table I'd built 25 years ago, and watched my family. Really watched them in a way I hadn't done in years. Maybe the lottery win made me sentimental, or maybe knowing I was about to change all our lives at Monday's party. Either way, I found myself studying the people I loved, most memorizing details I'd somehow stopped noticing. Celeste sat to my right, impeccable as always. At 53, she still turned heads, perfectly styled auburn hair, touched up every 6 weeks, at that Green Hills salon designer clothes, fitting her slender frame like custom pieces, jewelry catching light with every movement. Since I'd told her about the money, there'd been something different in her energy, an excitement and anticipation. I'd thought it was happiness for our family's future. Now I realize I was seeing something else entirely. Preston sat across from me next to Paige, 34, handsome in that country club way, pressed khakis, Ralph Lauren polo hair, styled to look effortless. He asked about my work, seemed genuinely interested in the mansion's progress, but his questions felt rehearsed, like memorized lines. When I asked about his restaurant consulting business, his answers turned vague. "We're navigating some challenges, Sterling, but your support means everything," he said, squeezing Paige's hand. "Between the baby coming and the market being what it is, we're grateful for family." I nodded, wanting to believe the best. Preston had always been smooth, polished in ways I'd never managed. And then there was Paige. My daughter, 29, and glowing with that particular pregnancy radiance. She sat with one hand perpetually on her rounded belly, talking animatedly about nursery colors and baby names. Her eyes sparkled when she looked at Preston, full of unguarded trust and love. When she looked at Celeste, it was with admiration. And when she looked at me, gratitude. "Dad, you've given us everything," she said when conversation turned to the mansion. "I don't know how we'll ever repay you." "You don't repay family, sweetheart," I told her, throat tight. "You just keep building, keep moving forward together." When dessert was nearly finished, Celeste's peach cobbler, another tradition, I decided it was time to share part of my news. "I have an announcement," I said, setting down my fork. 3 pairs of eyes turned toward me. "I've finished the mansion in Belmead. It's done, Paige. It's yours, my gift to you and Preston." Silence lasted only a heartbeat before Paige's face crumpled into tears. She pushed back from the table and threw her arms around my neck, her pregnant belly pressed between us. "Dad, I can't. It's too much. That house is enormous." I held my daughter, breathing in her familiar shampoo scent, the same brand since high school. "Nothing is too much for you, baby girl. Nothing." Preston stood, extending his hand across the table. When I shook it, his grip was firm, almost too firm. "Sterling, I don't know what to say. Thank you. This changes everything for us." Celeste smiled at me from across the table, reaching over to touch my forearm. Her fingers were cool against my skin. "You're always so generous, Sterling. Always thinking of others before yourself." I leaned back in my chair, feeling the warmth of the moment. "Actually, there's more. I have another surprise for Monday's party, something that's going to secure all our futures. But you'll have to wait until then." I saw it happen, just a flicker. Celeste and Preston's eyes met across the table, something passing between them that I couldn't quite read. It lasted maybe a second before Preston smiled and raised his glass. "To Sterling," he said, "the most generous father-in-law a guy could ask for." We all raised our glasses. Paige was still wiping away happy tears. Celeste's smile was perfect, practiced, and I sat there feeling like the luckiest man in Nashville, surrounded by the people who mattered most. "I can't wait to see everyone's faces Monday," I said. "It's going to be a celebration none of us will ever forget." "I'm sure it will be," Celeste said softly, her hand still on my arm. The evening wound down in warmth and laughter. Paige and Preston left around 9, promising to come see the mansion soon. Celeste helped me clear the dishes, humming contentedly. She seemed lighter somehow, more affectionate than she'd been in months. "You're a good man, Sterling Wade," she told me as we loaded the dishwasher. "The best husband a woman could ask for." I kissed her forehead, my heart full. Just trying to take care of my family. Later that night, as I was getting ready for bed, I heard Celeste on the phone downstairs. Her voice was low, but I caught fragments. "Monday, everything's falling into place. Just need to be patient." I figured she was talking to one of her friends about the party, excited to share the news. Why would I think anything else after 30 years' trust wasn't something I questioned? It was as natural as breathing. If I'd been paying closer attention, I might have noticed how Celeste and Preston's eyes found each other when they thought I wasn't looking. I might have wondered why Preston's gratitude felt more like relief. I might have asked myself why Celeste seemed so eager to hear about Monday's surprise, but I'd given my trust completely, 30 years of it, unquestioning and absolute. And absolute trust, I would learn, leaves no room for doubt. A week later, with the gender reveal party just days away, I drove to the Belmead mansion with Howard Bennett, my foreman and oldest friend. It was Sunday afternoon, 8 days before the party. The Nashville sun hung heavy in a cloudless sky, the kind of heat that makes asphalt shimmer and reminds you why Southerners move slow in summer. I'd asked Howard to come with me for one final walkthrough. He'd been my foreman for 20 years, closer than most blood relatives. If there was anyone I trusted to catch what I might miss, it was him. The mansion rose before us, like something out of a magazine, Southern colonial architecture, with white columns reaching 2 stories high, wrap-around porches on both levels, gardens that would bloom spectacularly come spring. The circular driveway curved through ancient oaks, dripping with Spanish moss. It was everything I'd imagined when I first bought this land 5 years ago. "I built this with my own hands, Howard." I said, standing beside my truck and staring up at it. "Ma, every beam, every corner, every detail." Howard whistled low, shaking his head in that way he did when he was genuinely impressed. "Boss, this is the finest work you've ever done. Paige is one lucky girl." We spent the next hour going through the house room by room, checking plumbing fixtures, testing light switches, running water in every sink and shower. Howard took notes on his clipboard, but we both knew this was just ceremony. The house was perfect. I'd made sure of it. Then I noticed something odd. Through the front windows, I could see a silver sedan parked near the side entrance, Celeste's car. My stomach tightened with confusion. She didn't say she'd be here today. Howard glanced over, frowning. Maybe she wanted to see it for herself, surprise inspection. We headed toward the main house, but it was empty. Then I heard voices drifting from somewhere behind the property, near the pool house and garden cottage I'd added last month. They'd been Celeste's idea, a place for guests to stay, when Paige and Preston hosted parties. Howard and I moved toward the sound. As we got closer, I recognized Celeste's voice, clear and distinct, through the afternoon air. The pool house door was cracked open just enough for voices to carry through the gap. I was about to call out to her when I heard another voice. Preston's voice. I stopped cold. Howard froze beside me, his hand instinctively reaching for my arm. Something in the air shifted, that primal instinct that warns you before your mind catches up. What I heard next would shatter everything. Celeste's voice, cold and calculating, in a way I'd never heard before. "Sterling's going to announce the lottery money at the party. Once we get him to set up that trust fund for the baby, we drain everything and disappear together." Preston's reply came easy, casual. "Your daughter is so naive, Celeste. She actually believes we're the perfect couple. She thinks this baby is going to fix everything." Celeste laughed, a sound I'd never heard in 30 years of marriage, sharp and cruel. "I've been trapped in this working-class nightmare for 3 decades, Preston." His dirty hands, his job site stories, pretending to care about his so-called honest work. "Hakamita, I deserve so much better than this." "We both do." "What about Paige?" Preston asked. There was no concern in his voice, just logistics. "Paige will be fine. She's as stupid as her father. She'll never figure it out until it's too late. Let Sterling play the doting grandfather while we're living in Europe on his millions. What if he suspects something? He won't." Celeste's voice dripped with contempt. "He's trusted me for 30 years. He's not going to stop now. People like Sterling, they build things, they work hard, but they don't think. They just believe." The world stopped. I couldn't breathe, couldn't move, couldn't process what I was hearing. Every word was a sledgehammer blow. 30 years. Dirty hands. Working class nightmare. Stupid as her father. The woman I'd built a life with. The man I'd welcomed as a son. Together, planning to destroy everything while using my own granddaughter as bait. I felt Howard's hand tighten on my shoulder, grounding me. "Brother," he whispered, his voice shaking. I heard it too. "I'm here." My legs wanted to give out. My hands, these calloused, scarred hands that Celeste had just called dirty, clenched into fists. Through the crack in the door, I could see them now. Celeste, leaning against the pool house wall, Preston standing close, too close. Not touching, but the intimacy between them was unmistakable. How long? How long had this been going on? How many times had I kissed her goodnight while she plotted with my daughter's husband? How many dinners had we shared where they'd exchanged those looks? I'd dismissed. "We need to go," Howard whispered urgently. "Now, before they know we're here." He was right. I couldn't confront them, not yet, not like this, not when rage was clouding everything. We backed away, carefully, silently, our boots finding soft grass instead of gravel. My heart hammered so loud I was certain they'd hear it. We made it back to my truck. Howard climbed in beside me, his face pale with shock and fury. He'd known Celeste almost as long as I had. He'd been at our wedding, had watched Paige grow up, had celebrated every milestone with us. Sterling. He started, but I held up my hand. I couldn't talk yet. If I opened my mouth, I'd either scream or vomit or both. I started the engine, my hands shaking on the wheel. Through the rearview mirror, I could see the mansion, that beautiful, perfect house I'd built with love and pride and hope for my daughter's future. The house where my wife was plotting to rob me blind with my son-in-law. The betrayal wasn't just personal. It was everything. My marriage, my family, my trust, my judgment. Every foundation I'd built my life on had just turned to sand. I'd weathered storms before financial crises, business failures, the collapse of carefully laid plans. But nothing could have prepared me for the sound of 30 years crumbling into a lie spoken in my wife's voice inside a house I built with my own hands. Howard drove. I sat silent Nashville streets, blurring past the window, every word I'd just heard, replaying in my head, like an endless loop. I couldn't drive, couldn't trust my hands on the wheel, couldn't trust my judgment about anything anymore. Howard had taken my keys without asking, understanding what I couldn't say. The city scrolled past familiar streets that suddenly felt foreign, like I'd woken up in someone else's life. My mind wouldn't stop replaying it. Every sentence, every inflection, every casual cruelty. Dirty hands. I looked down at my palms, scarred and calloused from decades of honest work. These hands had framed houses, poured foundations, crafted dreams into reality, and she'd called them dirty. Working-class nightmare. Everything I'd built, everything I was reduced to her contempt. The business I'd grown from nothing, the reputation I'd earned one satisfied customer at a time, the values I'd tried to live by, all of it was just a prison to her. Stupid as her father. She thought we were both fools. Paige, my brilliant daughter who'd graduated summa cum laude, who'd built a career in education, who saw goodness in people stupid, and me who'd provided everything, who'd loved her unconditionally for 30 years, stupid for believing. Trapped for 3 decades. Our entire marriage a sentence she'd been serving every anniversary dinner, every family vacation, every quiet evening on the porch. Had she been counting down the days until she could escape? The memories came flooding back, and now I saw them through a different lens. Our wedding day, had she been calculating even then? The night Paige was born, when I'd held Celeste's hand and cried, had that meant nothing? Our 30th anniversary last year, when I'd surprised her with a weekend in Gatlinburg, had she been thinking of Preston the whole time? Every night I'd come home with dirt under my fingernails. Proud of a good day's work, she'd felt disgust. Every construction story I'd shared at dinner, she'd been silently scorning me. Every time I'd reached for her hand or kissed her goodnight, I'd been touching someone who was just waiting for a chance to destroy me. The pain was physical, a crushing weight in my chest, like something vital had broken loose and was rattling around where it didn't belong. "Brother," Howard finally said, his voice rough. "What do you need? Just tell me, anything." I forced myself to focus, to think past the roaring in my ears. I need to protect Paige." Howard nodded, his jaw tight. "What about you? What do you need?" I shook my head. "Later. Paige comes first. She's pregnant, Howard. 6 months pregnant with Preston's child." I stopped, a new horror dawning. Or is it even his? Howard's knuckles went white on the steering wheel. "Don't do that to yourself. Not yet. We don't know anything." I said the words bitter. Everything I thought I knew was a lie. He pulled up to my workshop in East Nashville. Not my house, because I couldn't face going home yet. Couldn't pretend everything was normal when Celeste walked through the door. The workshop was my sanctuary. The smell of sawdust tools hanging on pegboard walls, blueprints spread across workbenches. This was where I'd always thought most clearly. Howard walked me inside, stood there like he was worried I'd collapse if he left. Maybe I would. I need to make some calls. I told him, my voice steadier than I felt. I need to think. You sure you don't want me to stay? I'm sure. Thank you, Howard. For everything. For being there. He gripped my shoulder hard. 20 years, boss. I'm not going anywhere. After he left, I stood alone in the workshop, surrounded by the tools of my trade. Half-finished projects sat on benches, a custom cabinet for a client in Franklin, a mantel I was carving for Paige's old living room. Evidence of a life that made sense just hours ago. I made my first decision I wouldn't break. Not now. Not when Paige needed me clear-headed and strong. My hands shook as I pulled out my phone. I scrolled through contacts until I found Leonard Parrish, a lawyer I'd known for 20 years, someone who'd handled my business contracts and the occasional property dispute. Someone I trusted. Leonard, it's Sterling Wade. I need an appointment tomorrow morning. It's urgent. I paused, steadying my voice. And I need absolute discretion. Leonard must have heard something in my tone, because he didn't ask questions. 7 a.m., my office. I'll clear my schedule. After hanging up, I sat at my workbench staring at these dirty hands Celeste despised. They told the story of my life. Every scar had a memory attached. The crooked finger from the framing accident in '98. The burn mark from a welding mishap in 2003. The calluses that never went away, permanent evidence of what I did, who I was. These hands had built our first house, a modest 3-bedroom in Donaldson, that we'd stretched to afford. They'd held Paige minutes after she was born, so tiny and perfect, I'd been terrified of breaking her. They'd built the mansion in Belle Meade, with every ounce of love I had, imagining my daughter raising her family there. And Celeste called them dirty. I thought about the $100 million sitting in an account I hadn't told anyone about yet. Money I'd planned to share, to use to secure their futures, to prove that all the hard work had meant something. They'd been planning to trap me into setting up a trust fund, then drain it and disappear. Using my granddaughter, my own flesh and blood, as bait. The rage came then, white-hot and clean. But underneath it was something worse: shame. How had I missed this? How had I been so blind? What kind of man doesn't see his own wife's contempt, doesn't notice when his son-in-law is sleeping with his wife? But I pushed the shame down. There'd be time for that later. Right now, I had to think strategically. The party was 8 days away. They were planning to make their move, then probably thinking I'd be so happy and distracted I wouldn't notice details, wouldn't ask the right questions about the trust fund. I wouldn't cry. Not yet. First, I had to protect my daughter from the truth I'd just discovered. Then, and only then, would I allow myself to shatter. But shattering was a luxury I couldn't afford right now, not when Paige's whole world was about to break. The next morning, Monday, I met Leonard Parrish at his downtown Nashville office, trying to keep my hands steady as I shook his. Leonard's practice occupied the 10th floor of a glass building overlooking the Cumberland River. I'd been here before: contract signings, property disputes, the routine business of construction work. But walking through that door at 9 a.m., I felt like a different person than the one who'd signed those papers. That man had trusted. This man knew better. Leonard took one look at my face and gestured toward the leather chairs facing his desk. "Sterling, sit down." "What happened?" I told him everything. The lottery win, $100 million I'd been planning to share with my family. The mansion I'd built as a gift. And then the words I'd overheard at the pool house. I repeated Celeste and Preston's conversation, as precisely as I could remember. Every contemptuous word burned into my memory. Leonard listened without interrupting, his expression growing grimmer with each sentence. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair and let out a long breath. Sterling, I'm sorry. I can't imagine. But legally, this is very clear. We're looking at infidelity conspiracy to commit fraud, possibly more depending on how deep this goes. He pulled out a legal pad and started making notes. First question, the lottery money. Who claimed it? Whose name is on the account? Mine, I said. Just mine. I bought the ticket with my own money, claimed it myself. Haven't told anyone but Howard. Good. That's very good. Leonard wrote something down. In Tennessee, lottery winnings claimed during marriage can be considered marital property if commingled with joint assets. But since you haven't told Celeste, haven't deposited it into joint accounts, and can prove it was purchased and claimed solely by you, we can argue it's separate property. My head was spinning with legal terminology, but I focused on what mattered. Can she take it? Not if we move fast. We need to establish clear protections immediately, separate accounts, legal documentation, everything firewalled before she knows it exists. Leonard outlined the strategy, his voice crisp and professional, but I could hear the anger beneath it. He'd met Celeste at firm parties, had probably thought we were the model couple. Second, we need evidence. More than just your word and Howard's, though having a witness helps tremendously. We need recordings, documentation. Since you own the Belmead property outright, you have legal right to install surveillance equipment. I don't want to spy on my own wife. I said the words feeling absurd even as I said them. Leonard's look was sympathetic, but firm. Sterling, she's already spying on you. She's counting your money, planning how to steal it, using your grandchild as leverage. This isn't about being sneaky. It's about protecting yourself and Paige. He was right. I nodded. Third, we need financial protection beyond just the lottery money. I'm going to refer you to Vincent Cross, best financial advisor in Nashville. He'll help you separate your assets, establish trusts, make sure everything you've built over 30 years doesn't disappear in a divorce settlement. How long will all this take? I asked. Leonard considered. To gather solid evidence, build an airtight case, 2 weeks minimum. 3 would be better. The party's next Monday, I said. 8 days from now. Leonard looked up sharply. You're still planning to have it? They're expecting it. If I cancel, they'll know something's wrong. And yes, Leonard, I'm planning to expose them there. In front of everyone. His tone was careful, neutral. About 35 people. Family, close friends. Not a media circus, but yes, they need to know the truth. Celeste and Preston were planning to humiliate me in the dark. I'll give them the truth in the light. Leonard studied me for a long moment. All right. If that's what you want, we'll make it happen. But Sterling, once you do this, there's no going back. Your marriage is over. Your relationship with your son-in-law is over. Your daughter's marriage is probably over. Are you prepared for that? I thought about Paige, 6 months pregnant, believing her husband loved her and her mother supported her. I thought about the life I'd imagined just days ago. Christmases together, watching my grandchild grow up surrounded by family. All of it was already gone, burned to ash by words spoken in a pool house. I'm prepared, I said. And Leonard, I need this done right. No mistakes, no loopholes they can slip through. You have my word. By 2 that afternoon, I was sitting in Vincent Cross's office 3 blocks away. Vincent was younger than Leonard, maybe 40, with the sharp eyes of someone who made his living spotting financial traps before his clients fell into them. Leonard had called ahead, explained the situation. Vincent didn't waste time on sympathy. First priority, securing the lottery money. We'll establish an irrevocable trust immediately with you as the sole beneficiary. Your wife won't even know it exists. let alone be able to access it. He typed rapidly on his computer, pulling up documents and forms. Second, your business assets. Wade Construction, that's entirely in your name. Yes, started it before we married, built it myself. Good. We'll firewall that too. Third, joint accounts. I'm recommending we freeze everything. File the paperwork today, effective immediately. She'll notice, I said. She'll notice everything's fine until she tries to access the accounts. By then, you'll have already made your announcement. Vincent's smile was thin. Sometimes the best defense is not giving them a chance to attack first. Over the next 3 hours, I signed more documents than I could count. Trust agreements, asset protection forms, declarations of separate property. Each signature felt like closing a door on 30 years of my life. Vincent walked me through every page, explaining in plain English what each document meant. By the time we finished, the $100 million was locked in a trust only I could access. My business was protected. The mansion in Belmead, still titled solely in my name since it was meant as a gift, remained mine to do with as I pleased. Leonard pushed the final stack of papers across his desk when I returned to his office at 5. Sign here and your wife won't be able to touch a penny of that money. I signed without hesitation, 30 years of trust erased with one stroke of a pen. But it wasn't cruelty. It was clarity. Celeste had shown me exactly who she was. I was just making sure she couldn't destroy me with that knowledge. Over the next few days, from Tuesday through Thursday, Howard and I returned to the Belmead mansion to install the surveillance equipment Leonard had approved. Tuesday morning, I picked Howard up at 6 a.m. We drove to Belmead in silence, my truck loaded with small cameras disguised as smoke detectors and audio recorders no bigger than buttons, technology that would let me spy on my own wife in a house I'd built with my own hands. We worked methodically, installing cameras in the pool house, where I'd overheard that first conversation, and in the main living room. Howard handled the technical aspects, while I fed him tools and tried not to think too hard about what we were doing. Walking through that mansion was torture. Every room I'd framed, every detail I'd obsessed over, now it was all just part of a trap I was setting. The crown molding I'd spent weeks perfecting, the custom built-ins, the hand-laid tile, all of it built with love for my daughter's future, now weaponized to catch the people trying to destroy her. Boss, Howard said quietly as we finished. You're doing the right thing. Paige needs to know the truth. I nodded, not trusting my voice. By Wednesday morning, the system was operational. I set up alerts on my laptop, then waited. The first recording came through Thursday morning at 10:15. My phone buzzed while I was reviewing permits at my office. My hands shook as I clicked play. Celeste and Preston were back at the pool house. The party's in 5 days, Preston said casually. I've already booked flights to Geneva 2 weeks out. First class, obviously. I'll follow 3 days later, Celeste replied. After I've transferred everything from the trust fund, we need the time gap to look natural. My stomach churned. They'd thought of everything, choreographed every step. What about Sterling? Preston asked. Celeste laughed, that cold sound. He'll be devastated, completely destroyed, but that's not our problem anymore. Let him drown in his working-class misery while we're sipping champagne in Switzerland. I had to stop the recording, had to stand up, pace, breathe. The second recording came that afternoon. Preston's voice had lost its casual confidence. The restaurant consulting business is done, Celeste. Completely underwater. I've been embezzling from investors to cover losses, and there are some very dangerous people who want their money back. A pause. How dangerous? The kind who don't sue, the kind who break things. Preston sounded scared. That's why we need Sterling's money. This isn't just about lifestyle anymore. It's survival. So Preston wasn't just a con man, he was desperate, backed into a corner by his own failures. And he'd decided my family's destruction was his way out. The third recording hit hardest, Friday evening, just as I was shutting down for the night. Celeste's voice. "We've been planning this for 3 years, Preston. Since we first met at that fundraiser, since you told me about your business ideas, and I saw a way out. Everything since then, the courtship, the wedding, even the pregnancy, it's all been calculated. Paige never suspected. Paige is exactly like her father, trusting, naive, desperate to believe the best in people. The pregnancy was the final piece. I knew once there was a grandchild involved, Sterling would do anything. 3 years. They'd been plotting this since before Preston and Paige were even engaged. My daughter's entire marriage was a lie from the very first date. Saturday morning, I met Diana Frost at a small diner in Hermitage. Diana was Preston's secretary, until she'd realized what he was really doing. She slid a manila folder across the table, hands trembling. "I've felt sick about this for months, Mr. Wade. These are emails between Preston and your wife going back 3 years. And these are financial documents showing how Preston was planning to get you to sign fake business loan papers." I opened the folder. The emails were damning casual discussions of the Wade Project, strategies for managing Sterling's expectations, debates about timeline and exit strategy. They discussed my life like I was a mark, a target. "They were going to drain you dry, Mr. Wade," Diana said quietly. "Not just the lottery money, everything. Your business, your assets, your reputation." "Why are you telling me this?" "Because Paige deserves better. And because Preston threatened me when I said I couldn't be part of it anymore." I thanked her, took the documents, and drove to my workshop. Howard met me there that evening. I showed him everything, the recordings, the emails, the financial documents. Howard leaned back against my workbench. "It's more than enough, Sterling." "I know." "So what are you going to do?" I looked at the laptop screen frozen on a frame of Celeste and Preston laughing together. They looked happy, celebrating their cleverness. "I'm going to let them think they've won," I said. Right up until Monday night, the recordings filled my laptop, hours of betrayal documented with chilling clarity. But the hardest part wasn't gathering the evidence. It was deciding when to stop protecting them and start protecting Paige. That line, I realized, had been crossed the moment I heard my wife call me a fool. With the party just days away, I found myself sitting in my truck one evening, parked across the street from Paige's house, watching my daughter through a lit window. It was Friday night, 4 days before the party. Through the window, I could see Paige folding tiny baby clothes at her kitchen table, smiling, one hand resting on her belly. Preston was there too, sitting on the couch with his phone, occasionally looking up to say something that made her laugh. From the outside, they looked like the perfect couple, young, happy, expecting their first child. The American dream playing out in a modest house in East Nashville. But I knew the truth rotting beneath that picture-perfect surface, and my heart twisted in my chest. In 4 days, my daughter's world would collapse. The question that had been haunting me for a week grew louder. Should I tell her now? Pull her aside, sit her down, explain everything before Monday's party? Spare her the public revelation, the witnesses, the spectacle of watching her mother and husband exposed in front of family and friends? But Leonard had been clear. Don't tell her while she's alone with Preston in that house. Don't put her in a position where he can manipulate her, threaten her, or worse. The "or worse" hung in the air between us. Preston was desperate, backed into a corner by dangerous people. Desperate men did desperate things. So I sat in my truck and watched my phone in my hand, torn between protecting my daughter from immediate danger and protecting her from the truth that would shatter everything she believed. I made a call instead. "Lauren, it's Sterling Wade, Paige's dad." Lauren Blake had been Paige's best friend since high school. She was a nurse at Vanderbilt, steady and sensible, the kind of friend who showed up when life fell apart. Mr. Wade, is everything okay? I need you at the party on Monday, I said, choosing my words carefully. And I need you to stay close to Paige. Very close. She's going to need you. There was a pause. Lauren was smart enough to hear what I wasn't saying. What's going to happen? I can't explain right now, but trust me, she needs her best friend there. Can you promise me that? Of course, I'll be there. I hung up and sat in the darkness, watching my daughter smile at a man who'd been lying to her for 3 years. My hands gripped the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. Meanwhile, at home, I had to keep performing. Every dinner with Celeste was a masterclass in acting worthy of an Oscar. She'd sit across from me talking about the party, about our future, about all the wonderful things we'd do with the money. "Darling, I'm so proud of you," she said Wednesday night over chicken parmesan. $100 million, we're going to do amazing things. Maybe a house in France. I've always wanted to summer on the Riviera. Every word was poison, but I smiled and nodded. Whatever makes you happy, sweetheart. You've always been so good to me, she said, reaching across the table to squeeze my hand. Her touch made my skin crawl, but I squeezed back, playing the devoted husband one last time. Preston came by Thursday afternoon, ostensibly to help with party preparations. He shook my hand with that confident grip, looking me straight in the eye like the world's greatest con man. "Sterling, I can't thank you enough for everything you've done for us. The house, the support, just everything." I wanted to break every finger in that hand. Instead, I clapped him on the shoulder. "Family takes care of family, Preston. That's what we do." After Monday's announcement, we should sit down and talk about some investment opportunities. I've got some ideas that could really multiply that lottery money. "I bet you do," I thought. Out loud, I said, "Absolutely. Everything's going to change after Monday." He smiled, thinking I meant I'd be writing checks. He had no idea what "everything's going to change" really meant. Thursday afternoon, Paige stopped by to help with decorations. She was radiant, practically glowing with pregnancy and happiness. We worked together, hanging streamers and setting up tables, and she chattered away about baby names and nursery themes and all the dreams she had for her family. "Dad, everything's going to be perfect," she said, hanging a banner that read "Boy or Girl" across the garden arch. "I can feel it. This baby, our life together. The new house, it's all falling into place exactly like it should." I pulled her into a hug, holding her tight, feeling her belly press against me, my grandchild innocent and unaware of the storm about to break for all of us. "And I love you, baby girl," I said into her hair. "More than anything in this world. No matter what happens, you remember that. No matter what you hear or what you learn, I love you, and I'll always be here for you." She pulled back, laughing, confused by my intensity. "Dad, you're being weird. Of course I know you love me. Is everything okay?" "Everything's going to be okay," I promised, hoping it was true. "I just want you to know that you can always count on me. Always." She hugged me again, then went back to hanging decorations, humming happily. And I stood there watching her, memorizing this moment, the last time my daughter would be this innocently happy, before I took a sledgehammer to the illusions holding her world together. That night, after she left, I sat in my workshop alone. The evidence was all compiled, organized, ready. The party was planned down to the last detail. Leonard had the legal documents prepared. Vincent had secured all the assets. Howard would be there for support. Lauren would be there to catch Paige when she fell. Everything was ready. Everything except me. Because no matter how righteous the cause, no matter how justified the revelation, I was about to destroy my daughter's happiness. Her marriage, Her trust in her mother, her faith in the family she'd grown up believing in, all of it would shatter Monday afternoon. I was saving her from a worse fate, I knew that. Better she learn now than after they'd stolen everything and disappeared. Better she know before the baby came. Better she escape this web of lies while she still could. But knowing something intellectually and feeling it emotionally are two different things. And I knew that soon, everything my daughter believed about her life would crumble: her mother's love, her husband's faithfulness, the safety of the family she'd grown up trusting completely. I could only pray she was strong enough to rebuild, because she would have to, for herself and for the baby she was carrying. Sunday morning, 2 days before the party, I threw myself into final preparations, needing the distraction of logistics to keep my mind from spiraling into collapse. I focused on details to stay sane. Confirmed catering for 35 guests, barbecue from Martin's Page's favorite. Checked decorations at the Belle Meade mansion, pink and blue balloons, gender-neutral streamers, tables set up in the garden under the oaks. Reviewed the guest list one more time. Family, close friends, people who'd known us for decades. And most importantly, the sound system. I tested it 3 times, making sure the speakers worked perfectly, that the audio would be crystal clear. The irony wasn't lost on me. I was preparing for a celebration that would become an execution. Celeste continued playing the perfect wife, the excited grandmother-to-be. Sunday morning she made pancakes for breakfast, humming while she cooked. I watched her move around our kitchen, the kitchen we'd remodeled together 10 years ago, and saw a complete stranger. "I can't wait for tomorrow," she said, sliding a plate in front of me. "Our whole family together celebrating new life. And your big announcement about the money. Sterling, it's going to be perfect." "Perfect," I echoed, forcing a smile. "That's exactly what it'll be." She kissed the top of my head as she passed, and I had to suppress the urge to flinch. How many times had she kissed me while planning my destruction? How many "I love yous" had been lies? Preston stopped by Sunday afternoon, confident and cocky, a man who thought he'd already won. He found me in the garage loading supplies into my truck for tomorrow's setup. "Need help, Sterling?" he asked, that easy smile on his face. "I've got it, but thanks." He leaned against my workbench, watching me work. "After tomorrow's announcement, we should sit down and talk about some business expansion opportunities. I've got some connections who could really help multiply that lottery money. Make it work for you instead of just sitting in a bank." I set down the box I was holding, turned to face him. "Absolutely, Preston. Everything's going to change after tomorrow's party." "I'm glad you're open to it," he said. "You've worked hard your whole life. You deserve to let your money work for you now." "You're right," I agreed. "I do deserve that." He had no idea what "everything's going to change" really meant. He thought I'd be writing checks, funding his schemes, bailing him out of whatever mess he'd made with those dangerous people. He didn't know that in less than 24 hours, he'd be lucky if he wasn't arrested. Sunday afternoon, I drove Paige to Belle Meade one last time so she could see the mansion before tomorrow's party. We walked through the rooms together, her hand in mine like when she was little. "Dad, it's perfect," she breathed, standing in the master bedroom that overlooked the garden. Tears streamed down her face, happy tears, the kind that broke my heart. I can't believe you built this for us, for our family. You deserve it, baby girl. You and that little one." I placed my hand on her belly, felt a tiny kick. My grandchild, innocent of everything about to unfold. "Preston and I are so lucky," she said, leaning her head on my shoulder. "To have you, to have this house, to have each other. Sometimes I feel like I don't deserve this much happiness." I wrapped my arms around her, memorizing the feel of her absolute trust. "You deserve everything good in this world. Don't ever forget that." We stood there for a long time, father and daughter, in a house built with love that would soon become evidence in a divorce. The night before, 2 a.m. Monday morning, I was in my workshop surrounded by tools and the smell of sawdust. Sleep was impossible. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Paige's face, heard her talking about how lucky she was, how perfect her life had become. I kept asking myself the same questions on an endless loop. When did Celeste stop loving me? Or had she ever started? Had our wedding day meant anything to her the night Paige was born? When I'd held Celeste's hand through labor, had she been calculating even then? Our 30th anniversary last year, had she already been planning her escape with Preston? 30 years of memories, all contaminated now by doubt. At 3 a.m., Howard's truck pulled up. He came in carrying 2 coffees from the all-night diner on Charlotte Pike, set one on my workbench without a word. We sat in silence for a while, just the sound of Nashville's distant traffic and the occasional creak of the building settling. "You ready, brother?" Howard finally asked. I took a long drink of coffee, let the bitterness coat my tongue. "No, but it doesn't matter. In about 12 hours, the truth comes out. No turning back." "You could still cancel," he said quietly. "Tell Paige privately, handle this without the spectacle." I'd considered it 1,000 times. And give them a chance to spin it, to manipulate her, to make me look like the crazy, jealous husband, numbered evidence first, truth second. That way nobody can deny what they've done. Howard nodded slowly. "For what it's worth, I think you're doing the right thing. It's going to be brutal, but it's right." "Doesn't make it easier." "No," he agreed. "No, it doesn't." At 5 a.m., Howard left to get a few hours of sleep before the party. I walked out to the front porch of my workshop, watched the sky lighten over East Nashville. The stars faded one by one, replaced by the pink and orange of dawn. Celeste was still asleep at home, probably dreaming of Switzerland, of freedom, of spending my money with Preston in some European paradise. In 12 hours, she'd be exposed in front of everyone she knew. And Paige would learn that her mother and husband had been conspiring to destroy her father, using her and her unborn child as leverage in an elaborate con. I thought about my daughter sleeping peacefully at home, one hand probably resting on her belly even in sleep, secure in her belief that she was loved and protected, that security would be gone by evening. But better now than later. Better the truth than a comfortable lie. Better she rebuild her life on solid ground than continue building on quicksand. I didn't sleep that night. I sat on the porch as dawn broke over Nashville, watching the stars fade, wondering if the woman sleeping in my bed had ever truly loved me, or if from the very beginning she'd been counting down the days until she could finally leave. That afternoon, as Nashville's sun warmed the Belmead garden, I stood at the mansion I'd built and watched the first guests begin to arrive. 2 p.m. Monday. The party was starting. The garden looked perfect, pink and blue ribbons streaming from the oak tree's tables draped in white linen. A banner stretched across the garden arch, reading, "Boy or Girl." The catering staff from Martin's was setting up barbecue stations. The gender reveal cake sat on a center table, white frosting with a question mark, hiding either pink or blue inside. Everything looked like a celebration. Only I knew it was a trial. I stood near the mansion's back entrance, greeting guests as they arrived. 35 people, just as planned. Barbara Sullivan came first, one of Celeste's book club friends, carrying a gift wrapped in yellow paper. Miguel Santos arrived with his wife, both dressed up. Miguel had worked on my crew for 15 years. More construction guys filtered in, men who'd helped build this very mansion. Men who knew what honest work looked like. Howard arrived early, positioning himself near the sound system like we'd planned. He gave me a subtle nod. Everything was ready. At 2:20, Lauren Blake walked through the garden gate. She found me, immediately came over with a hug that looked casual but felt deliberate. "I'm here, Sterling," she said quietly. "I'll stay right next to Paige, just like you asked." "Thank you, Lauren. She's going to need you." Lauren's eyes searched my face, trying to understand what was coming. Should I be worried? Just be ready to catch her when she falls. 2:30. Paige arrived with Preston. My daughter was radiant in a light blue maternity dress, her belly prominent now at 27 weeks. Her smile could have lit up the whole garden. Preston had his hand on her waist, playing the devoted husband, nodding at guests, accepting congratulations on the baby. They walked toward me together, and I had to steel myself against the wave of protective fury that threatened to break through my careful composure. Dad. Paige threw her arms around me as much as her belly would allow. This is incredible, the decorations, the food, everyone's here. Only the best for my baby girl, I said, holding her tight. Preston extended his hand, that confident smile firmly in place. Sterling, this is amazing. Thank you for doing this for us. I shook his hand, meeting his eyes directly. We ready for the big revelations today? Absolutely, he said smoothly. This is going to be a day we'll remember forever. Yes, I agreed. Yes, it will be. Something flickered in his expression, just for a second, like he'd caught something in my tone. But then Paige was pulling him toward the food tables, and the moment passed. Celeste arrived fashionably late at 2:45, making an entrance as she always did. She wore a cream-colored designer dress that probably cost more than most people's monthly mortgage, her hair perfect, her jewelry catching the sunlight. She was performing her final act, the proud wife, the excited grandmother, the woman who had everything. She made her way through the crowd, greeting guests, accepting compliments, playing her role flawlessly. When she reached me, she slipped her arm through mine, leaned in close. Sterling, darling, this is beautiful. We're so lucky. I looked at her, really looked at her, maybe for the first time in years. Saw through the perfect makeup to the calculation beneath, saw through the smile to the contempt she'd been hiding for who knows how long. Yes, I said softly. We certainly are. She kissed my cheek, lingered just long enough for guests to see us as the perfect couple. 30 years of practice made it look effortless. By 3 p.m., everyone had arrived. The garden was full of laughter and conversation, the smell of barbecue mixing with magnolia blossoms. Kids ran around playing tag. Adults gathered in clusters, catching up on news, admiring the mansion. Howard stood near the sound system, pretending to adjust speakers. Lauren stayed close to Paige, helping her navigate through well-wishers who wanted to touch her belly and share advice. Celeste worked the crowd like a politician's wife, all charm and grace. And Preston stood with a group of my crew guys, telling some story that made them laugh, his hand, holding a beer, looking relaxed and comfortable. Looking like family. Nobody knew. Not one person in that garden suspected that anything was wrong. They'd come to celebrate new life, to share in joy, to be part of something happy. I watched them all from my position near the mansion steps. Watched my daughter glow with happiness. Watched my wife perform affection she didn't feel. Watched my son-in-law play the role of devoted husband while planning to abandon ship with millions of my dollars. The weight of what I was about to do settled over me like a physical thing. In 15 minutes, I would destroy the illusion. I would take this scene of celebration and turn it into something else entirely. These people, my friends, my employees, my family, would witness the dismantling of everything they thought they knew about the Wades. Was I doing the right thing? The question had haunted me for days. But standing there watching Preston laugh with my crew while planning to betray my daughter, watching Celeste smile at guests while counting down to her escape, I knew the answer. Truth was always right, even when it hurt. Especially when it hurt. At 3:10, I caught Howard's eye. He nodded once, confirming the system was ready. I saw Lauren position herself closer to Paige, one hand resting casually on my daughter's shoulder. Strategic support for the collapse to come. 3:15. Time. I walked to the microphone that had been set up near the cake table. The movement caught people's attention, and conversations began to quiet. Someone clinked a glass, and the garden fell silent, all eyes turning toward me. Paige and Preston stood in the center of the crowd, holding hands, smiling. Celeste stood nearby, her posture perfect, her expression one of proud anticipation. Around them, 33 people waited expectantly for the celebration to continue. This was the moment, the point of no return. Once I started speaking, there would be no way to undo what followed. Lives would change. Relationships would end. Truth would emerge from whatever dark place it had been hiding. Everything looked so perfect. The decorations, the laughter, the family gathered to celebrate, and that I thought was the cruelest irony of all. Betrayal always wore the mask of normalcy right up until the moment it was ripped away. The countdown began. I stood at the microphone watching everyone gather close around Paige and Preston. 3, 2, 1. Confetti cannons exploded. Pink burst across the garden, like a celebration of spring ribbons of rose and fuchsia, streaming through the air, catching sunlight floating down over the crowd like blessings. It's a girl. Paige screamed with joy, her hands flying to her face. Preston lifted her carefully, mindful of her belly, and spun her around while she laughed and cried at the same time. The crowd erupted in cheers and applause. Women rushed forward to hug Paige. Men clapped Preston on the back. "A granddaughter!" Celeste exclaimed, her voice carrying over the celebration. She dabbed at her eyes with a tissue, the perfect image of an emotional grandmother. "Oh, Sterling, a little girl." Everything was radiant. Pink confetti drifted down onto white tablecloths. The cake was cut, revealing pink layers inside. Champagne was poured. People toasted to the baby, to Paige and Preston, to new beginnings and bright futures. I made my way through the crowd to my daughter. She threw her arms around me, her face wet with happy tears. "Dad, a girl. We're having a girl." I held her tight, and for the first time since learning the truth, I let myself cry too. Real tears for the granddaughter I'd love and protect. For the daughter whose world I was about to shatter, for the innocence that was about to die in this beautiful garden. "I love you, baby girl," I whispered into her hair. "Whatever happens, whatever you hear or learn today, I love you and I'll always be here. Always." She pulled back, laughing through tears, not understanding the weight behind my words. "I love you too, Dad. You're the best father anyone could ask for." Preston stood nearby, accepting congratulations, his arm around Paige when she returned to his side. He caught my eye and raised his glass to me. A salute, a thanks, a celebration of what he thought was his impending payday. I raised my glass back. Wait, I thought. Just wait. I let the celebration continue for 10 minutes. Let people eat cake, take photos, toast the baby girl who would carry the Wade name into the next generation. Let them have this moment of pure joy before I took it away. Then I returned to the microphone. Tapped it once, twice. The sound cut through the laughter and conversations began to fade. People turned toward me, expectantly smiling, ready for more good news. "You everyone, if I could have your attention for just a moment more." The garden fell silent. 35 faces turned toward me, family, friends, colleagues, people who'd known me for decades, people who trusted me, and 3 people who'd been lying to me. I want to share something else with you all. Something I've been keeping quiet until today. I paused, making sure every eye was on me. Recently, I came into some money. $100 million to be exact. The gasp that went through the crowd was audible. Eyes widened, jaws dropped. Someone, Barbara Sullivan, I think, actually put her hand over her mouth in shock. "I won the lottery 2 weeks ago." I continued, my voice steady and clear, and I kept it quiet because I wanted to do something meaningful with it, something that would secure my family's future. I saw Preston's eyes light up with naked greed, saw Celeste's smile turn triumphant, victorious. This was what they'd been waiting for. The announcement. The moment when I'd reveal the money and offer to share it, walking right into their trap. I planned to split it, I said. Half for my daughter and granddaughter, set up a trust fund that would ensure they never wanted for anything. The other half for my wife and son-in-law to help with Preston's business ventures, to let Celeste have the lifestyle she's always wanted. Celeste reached over and touched my arm, her expression tender. Sterling, you're too generous. You've always been too generous. Around us, people smiled. This was the happy ending they'd expected. Lottery win, new baby family taken care of. The American dream in full bloom. I looked at my wife's hand on my arm, looked at her face, perfectly made up, perfectly composed. Looked at Preston standing with his arm around my daughter, looking like the picture of success and respectability. I was going to do all of that, I said. The past tense hung in the air like smoke. I was going to announce it today, make it part of this celebration, share my good fortune with the people I loved most. Something in my tone made people shift uncomfortably. The smiles began to falter. Lauren moved closer to Paige, her hand finding my daughter's shoulder. Celeste's smile stayed fixed, but I saw uncertainty flicker in her eyes. Preston's posture changed, tension creeping into his shoulders. Howard stood by the sound system, his finger hovering over the button we'd prepared, waiting for my signal. I let the silence stretch, let the anticipation build, let them wonder where this was going. 35 people waited, some still smiling, some beginning to frown, all of them focused completely on me. My face changed. The warmth drained from my voice. The mask I'd been wearing for the past 2 weeks finally fell away. I was going to split it that way. I repeated, my voice now ice cold. But then I discovered something that changed absolutely everything. Celeste's hand dropped from my arm. Preston's grip on Paige tightened, protective or possessive, I couldn't tell. Paige looked confused, glancing between us, sensing the shift in atmosphere but not understanding it. "Dad," she said quietly. "What do you mean?" I looked at my daughter, memorizing her face in this last moment of innocence. Then I looked at Celeste, at Preston, at the two people who'd planned to destroy everything I'd built. Like I said each word deliberate and clear, that the two people I planned to share this fortune with have been lying to me, to all of us, for years. Thank you for staying. Comment. And tell me, how do you think this family will react when they hear the recording? A reminder, this story includes fictional elements for entertainment purposes. If you'd like to stop now is a good moment. I continued, my voice calm but cold as winter steel. I want all of you to hear this, because family deserves to know the truth. I held up a small speaker connected to my phone. The device Howard had helped me set up, tested 3 times to make sure it would work perfectly. Around me, 35 people stood frozen, waiting, not understanding yet, but sensing something terrible about to break. This recording was made at this mansion 2 weeks ago in the pool house. Celeste went pale. Actually pale, the color draining from her face despite her careful makeup. Preston took a step back, his arm dropping from Paige's shoulders. "Dad, what?" Paige started. I pressed play. The speakers crackled once. Then Celeste's voice filled the garden, crystal clear and unmistakable. "Sterling's going to announce the lottery money at the party. Once we get him to set up that trust fund for the baby, we drain everything and disappear together." The crowd gasped. I saw heads turn, looking at Celeste, at Preston, trying to process what they were hearing. Preston's voice came next. "Your daughter is so naive, Celeste. She actually believes we're the perfect couple. She thinks this baby is going to fix everything. Paige made a sound, a small wounded noise that cut through me like a knife. Then Celeste's laugh, that cold, cruel sound I'd heard through the pool house door. I've been trapped in this working-class nightmare for 3 decades, Preston. His dirty hands, his job site stories, pretending to care about his so-called honest work. I deserve so much better than this. We both do. I watched the faces around me. Barbara Sullivan had her hand over her mouth, tears in her eyes. Miguel Santos looked at his own calloused hands, then at me, his expression stricken. My crewmen who'd worked beside me for years stood rigid with shock and growing anger. The recording continued. "What about Paige?" Preston's voice asked. "Paige will be fine. She's as stupid as her father. She'll never figure it out until it's too late. Let Sterling play the doting grandfather while we're living in Europe on his millions." The silence that followed was absolute. Not a breath, not a rustle, not a sound, except that recording playing out the conspiracy in cold, documented detail. Then came the worst part, the part that would haunt me forever. Celeste's voice again. "We've been planning this for 3 years, Preston, since before you even proposed. The courtship, the wedding, the pregnancy, all of it calculated. And Paige made it so easy. She's desperate to believe in love, just like her father." I stopped the recording. The silence in the garden was deafening, oppressive. Pink confetti lay scattered on the ground like the remains of shattered dreams. Paige stood in the center of it all, one hand on her belly, her face cycling through emotions too fast to process confusion, disbelief, dawning horror, devastation. She looked at Preston, her voice barely a whisper. "Tell me it's not true. Preston, tell me that's not real." Preston stood frozen, his mouth opening and closing, no words coming out. His face had gone gray. He looked like a man watching his execution. "Tell me!" Paige screamed, and the sound shattered whatever paralysis had gripped the crowd. Preston backed away, hands raised. "Paige, I can explain." "Explain what? That you never loved me? That our entire marriage was a lie? That you got me pregnant as part of a con?" Her voice cracked on the last word, broke into something raw and agonized. Paige turned to Celeste. Her mother, her face desperate for denial. Mom, please tell me this is some kind of mistake. Tell me Dad got it wrong somehow." Celeste's mask shattered. The perfect grandmother, the devoted wife, the elegant society woman, all of it crumbled, revealing something hard and cold beneath. She looked at Paige with contempt, the same contempt I'd heard in that recording. "You want the truth?" Celeste said, her voice sharp. "Fine. The truth is, I've been suffocating in this middle-class mediocrity for 30 years, watching your father come home covered in sawdust, listening to his boring stories about construction sites, pretending I was proud of his honest work, when all I felt was embarrassment." "You called me stupid!" Paige's voice was shrill, breaking. "Your own daughter, you called me stupid!" She wrapped her arms around her belly protectively, instinctively. Lauren was there instantly, one arm around Paige's shoulders, trying to hold her up as her knees started to buckle. "Get away from me!" Paige shoved at Preston when he tried to reach for her. "And don't touch me. Don't ever touch me again." I moved toward my daughter but stayed near the microphone, needing to finish what I'd started. "I'm sorry, baby girl. I'm so sorry you had to hear it this way. But you needed to know the truth." Around us, the party guests stood in shocked silence. Some were crying. Some looked angry. Miguel and 2 other crew members had moved closer to Preston, their body language threatening. Howard stood ready, watching everything, prepared to intervene if things got physical. Barbara Sullivan was the first to move. She walked straight to Celeste, looked her in the eye, and slapped her across the face. The sound echoed across the silent garden. 30 years! Barbara said, her voice shaking with fury. "I've been your friend for 30 years, and you're a monster." Celeste touched her reddening cheek, but her expression remained defiant. "I don't owe any of you anything. Not Sterling, not Paige, not this pathetic collection of working class. Stop talking," I said, my voice cutting through hers like a blade. "Just stop. You've said enough." Paige looked at her mother, then at her husband, then at me. And in that moment, 7 months pregnant and surrounded by pink confetti and celebration, my daughter understood that she'd been living inside a lie her entire life. The family she trusted, the love she believed in, none of it was what she thought. The gender reveal banner still hung above us, cheerful and bright. The cake sat half-eaten on tables. Champagne glasses held forgotten toasts. And in the center of it all, my daughter's world was ending one revelation at a time. Paige's knees buckled. Lauren caught her just in time, wrapping an arm around her shoulders and holding her upright. "I've got you," Lauren whispered. "I've got you, honey." Paige was shaking, trembling like she was freezing despite the warm Nashville afternoon. Her hand stayed protectively over her belly, that instinct to shield her daughter, even when her own world was collapsing. Celeste made no attempt to deny anything now. The mask was gone, completely replaced by raw fury. She turned on me, voice sharp and venomous. "You think you're the victim here, Sterling? I wasted 30 years of my life smiling through your dirty work clothes and your boring construction stories. I deserved better than this, better than you." "You deserved nothing," Barbara Sullivan said, voice shaking. "You had a good man who loved you, a beautiful daughter, a comfortable life, and you threw it all away for what? For freedom," Celeste spat. "From mediocrity. From his calloused hands and his pathetic pride in honest work." Miguel Santos stepped forward, face tight with anger. "Those calloused hands built half this city, lady. Those hands built this mansion you were planning to steal." Preston tried to approach Paige again, hands raised. "Paige, baby, please let me explain." "Don't call me that." Paige shoved him away with surprising force. "Don't touch me. You lied to me for 3 years. Our entire relationship was a lie." "It wasn't all a lie," Preston said desperately. "I do care about you. You called me naive. You called me stupid." Her voice cracked, tears streaming. "Was any of it real? Did you ever love me? Is this even your baby?" The last question hung in the air like a bomb. Preston's face went white. "Answer her," I said quietly. I think," Preston stammered. "You think?" Paige's scream was anguished. You don't even know." The guests backed away from Celeste and Preston, creating physical distance that matched their moral revulsion. Some women gathered closer to Paige, forming a protective barrier. The men, especially. My crew positioned themselves between me and Preston, their body language making it clear what would happen if he tried anything. I returned to the microphone one last time. "My lawyers will be in contact with both of you. Every piece of evidence has been legally documented. The recordings, the emails, the financial documents showing Preston's embezzlement and fraud. It's all logged and ready." I looked at Preston specifically. "And Preston, those dangerous people you owe money to, I may have some contact information I'm willing to share." Preston's face went from white to green. I turned to Paige, gently taking her arm. "Baby girl, you and your daughter are coming home with me. Right now. Everything I have is yours. The mansion, the business, the money, all of it." "Dad, Paige looked lost, a child again, despite being 29 and pregnant. "I don't understand. How could they?" "I know, sweetheart. But we're leaving now. Preston moved toward us. Paige, you can't just... I turned on him with a look that stopped him cold. Stay away from my daughter. Don't call her. Don't come to the house. If you come within 100 yards of her, I'll have you arrested. Preston backed away, his confidence completely shattered. We began walking toward the garden exit, Lauren supporting Paige on one side, me on the other. The guests parted for us, their faces showing respect, sympathy, tears. Barbara hugged Paige as we passed. Miguel squeezed my shoulder. Behind us, Celeste's voice rang out shrill and desperate. You can't just walk away, Sterling. That money is half mine. I have rights. I didn't turn around, just kept walking with my daughter toward the truck. Sterling! Celeste screamed. You bastard! You self-righteous, pathetic... Howard's voice cut through hers. Ma'am, I'm going to have to ask you to leave. This is private property. I helped Paige into my truck, Lauren climbing into the back seat with her. Paige was still crying silent tears that just kept coming. Lauren held her hand, whispered comfort. Howard jogged over to my window. I'll clean up here, boss. You take care of your daughter. Thank you, brother, for everything. That's what family does, he said. I started the truck. In the rearview mirror, I could see the mansion, that beautiful structure I'd built with love now forever tainted. Could see pink confetti scattered like fallen petals. Could see guests dispersing in shocked silence. And I could see Celeste standing motionless in the center of it all, surrounded by the wreckage of 30 years of lies. Paige looked back through the rear window as we drove away, watching her mother become smaller. When we turned onto the main road and the mansion disappeared, she finally spoke. You used to tell me, baby girl, anything built on lies will never stand. I never really understood what you meant. Her voice was hollow. I understand now. I reached over and squeezed her hand. We'll build something real, sweetheart. Something true. It'll be harder, but it'll be solid. I promise you that. As my truck rolled away from the mansion I'd built with my own hands, Paige stared back at her mother, standing motionless in the garden, surrounded by pink confetti and the rubble of 30 years of deception. And for the first time in her life, Paige understood what I'd always said, anything built on lies will never stand. That evening, I brought Paige to my modest house, the small place I'd lived before building anything for Celeste, the one that had always been mine alone. It wasn't much, a 3-bedroom craftsman in Donaldson I'd bought 35 years ago when I was just starting out. The mortgage had been paid off for 20 years. Celeste had never wanted to live here, said it was too small, too working class. She'd pushed for the house in Green Hills, the one with the right address and the right neighbors. This place had become my workshop storage, my retreat when I needed quiet. Now it would be Paige's sanctuary. Lauren helped me get her settled in the guest room, the room that still had some of Paige's childhood things in boxes in the closet. I made tea while Lauren found blankets and pillows, creating a nest of comfort around my devastated daughter. Paige sat on the bed, still in her maternity dress, from the party pink confetti stuck in her hair. She hadn't said much during the drive, just cried quietly, one hand on her belly, staring out the window at a world that no longer made sense. Dad! She finally said, her voice hoarse. Why didn't you tell me sooner when you first found out? I sat down beside her, careful not to crowd her. I wanted to, baby girl. Every day I wanted to pull you aside and tell you everything. But Leonard, my lawyer, he said I needed evidence first. Solid, documented evidence that couldn't be denied or explained away. You thought I wouldn't believe you. I thought Preston might convince you I was crazy, jealous, making things up. I took her hand, and I needed to make sure you weren't alone with him when you found out. Men who are desperate do desperate things, sweetheart. I couldn't risk your safety. Paige's other hand moved protectively over her belly. The baby. Dad, what if it's not even his? The question she'd screamed at Preston in the garden, the one he couldn't answer. The terrible uncertainty that would haunt her for weeks to come. We'll do a paternity test, I said gently. After she's born, when it's safe. But Paige, listen to me. I waited until she looked at me. That baby is innocent. Whatever Preston did, whatever lies he told that little girl, didn't ask for any of this. She's your daughter. She's my granddaughter. That's all that matters. Paige's face crumpled. What if I can't love her? What if every time I look at her, I see him? You will love her, Lauren said softly from the doorway. Because you're not them. You're you, and you have more love in your little finger than your mother and Preston have in their entire bodies combined. I left them talking, went to make more tea. While the kettle heated, I stood in my small kitchen and let myself feel the exhaustion I'd been holding at bay. 2 weeks of investigation, surveillance, preparation. The party, the revelation, the confrontation. Getting Paige out safely. Now came the next battle, the legal one. The next morning, Tuesday, Leonard Parrish arrived at 8 a.m. sharp. I'd called him the night before, told him to come by. We sat at my kitchen table, me, Leonard, and Howard, who'd shown up with coffee and pastries from the bakery on Gallatin Pike. First things first, Leonard said, spreading documents across the table. We file for divorce. 2 of them yours from Celeste and Paige's from Preston. We do it simultaneously based on adultery and fraud. How fast can this happen? I asked. In Tennessee, there's a 60-day waiting period for divorce. But we can file for legal separation immediately, which protects assets and establishes living arrangements. Given the evidence, the recordings, the emails, the financial documents, this should be straightforward. And the prenup I'd signed 130 years ago, Celeste's father's insistence. I'd never thought about it since. Leonard smiled grimly. Best decision you ever made, even if you didn't know it at the time. That prenup has an infidelity clause. If either party commits adultery, they forfeit all claims to marital assets and alimony. Between that and the lottery money being solely in your name, Celeste walks away with nothing. Good, I said flatly. What about Preston? Howard asked. That son of a... He glanced at me. What happens to him? Preston's more complicated. Leonard pulled out another set of documents. He's committed fraud, embezzlement from his investors' conspiracy to commit theft. We have enough evidence to press criminal charges. But, he paused, we have another option. What option? We offer him a deal. He signs away all parental rights to Paige's baby, agrees to a restraining order, leaves Nashville permanently, and we don't press charges. I looked at Leonard. You think he'll take it? He's desperate and scared. Those dangerous people he mentioned in the recordings, they're real. He's into some serious debt with some very serious people. If we press charges, he goes to jail. If we don't, he has a chance to run and maybe survive. I want him gone, I said. Completely gone from Paige's life and my granddaughter's life. If that means letting him run, so be it. What about Celeste? Howard asked. Celeste gets nothing, Leonard said. No money, no property, no alimony. She'll probably have to move in with her sister in Memphis. The house in Green Hills is in your name, Sterling. The cars, the accounts, all protected under the prenup and separate property laws. We spent the next 2 hours going through documents, strategies, timelines. Leonard would file the paperwork by end of business today. Preston would be served tomorrow. Celeste by the end of the week. After Leonard left, Howard stayed behind helping me make lunch. Paige emerged from the guest room around noon, looking exhausted but steady. We ate sandwiches in the small kitchen, not saying much, just being present for each other. That afternoon, while Paige napped, I checked on her through the half-open door. She lay on her side, one hand resting protectively on her belly. Awake, I realized, not sleeping, just staring at the wall. I didn't disturb her, but I could see her face in profile, the set of her jaw, the dryness of her eyes, the determination beginning to replace the devastation. And I knew, somehow, I knew she was making a choice about that baby. Whatever she decided, I would support. But I'd already seen it, she was choosing to fight. For herself, and for her daughter. In the weeks that followed, as Paige's pregnancy progressed into its final stages, the legal machinery began to turn slowly at first, then gathering momentum. The restraining orders were issued within 48 hours. Celeste was prohibited from contacting me or Paige from coming within 500 feet of my house. Preston received the same order plus additional restrictions regarding Paige specifically. That didn't stop them from trying. Celeste called constantly. The first week my phone lit up with her number dozens of times a day. The voicemails cycled through denial, anger, bargaining, and eventually desperate pleading. I deleted everyone without listening. When she started texting, I blocked her number entirely. She showed up at my house once 3 days after the party. Howard was there doing repairs on my porch. He told me later how she'd pulled up in her Mercedes and demanded to see Paige. I told her to leave, Howard said. She tried to push past me, actually put her hands on me. What did you do? Called the cops. She was gone before they arrived, but it's documented. Violation of the restraining order. Preston tried a different approach. He sent emails to Paige, long rambling messages, shifting between apology and justification, claiming he really did love her and explaining why he'd had no choice but to lie. Paige showed me the first one. Her hands shaking, then blocked his email address. He says he was going to tell me the truth, she said, voice hollow. After the baby was born, he says my mother pressured him into the whole thing. Do you believe him? No. She deleted the email. He had 3 years to tell me the truth. He chose the lie every single time. Diana Frost provided a sworn affidavit detailing everything she knew about Preston's financial fraud. The documents proved he'd embezzled over $200,000 from investors' money he'd claimed went into restaurant consulting deals that never existed. The money had gone to pay gambling debts and stay ahead of people who would hurt him if he didn't pay. Those dangerous people he mentioned, Leonard explained. They're real. Preston owes money to some very serious individuals. That's why he was so desperate for your lottery money. He wasn't just being greedy. He was trying to survive. I don't care, Paige said flatly. She was 7 months pregnant now, her belly prominent. He used me. He used my baby. He can deal with his own consequences. The divorce proceedings moved faster than I expected. The evidence was overwhelming: recordings, emails, financial documents, witness statements. Celeste's lawyer advised her to settle rather than fight. Preston's lawyer did the same, especially once we made it clear we could press criminal charges if he didn't cooperate. 10 weeks after the gender reveal party, Leonard called with news. They're both agreeing to settlements, he said. Celeste signs away all claims to marital assets in exchange for us not pursuing conspiracy to commit fraud charges. She also agrees to leave Tennessee permanently. And Preston signs away all parental rights to Paige's baby in exchange for us not pressing embezzlement and fraud charges. He also agrees to leave Nashville, maintain no contact with Paige, and essentially disappear from your lives completely. I looked at Paige, who was listening on speakerphone. She nodded slowly. Do it, I said. Get it in writing, get it legally binding, and get them out of our lives. The final hearings were scheduled for late September, when Paige would be about 8 months pregnant. I also made another decision during those weeks. The Belle Meade Mansion, that beautiful structure I'd built with such pride, I couldn't keep it. Couldn't give it to Paige when every room would remind her of betrayal. Couldn't sell it for profit when it represented such pain. So I donated it. Called up Haven House, a Nashville organization that provided shelter for women escaping domestic violence. Signed over the deed, the whole property, everything. Are you sure? The director asked, stunned. Mr. Wade, this property is worth millions. I'm sure, I said. Turn it into something good. Help women who need a safe place to rebuild their lives. That's what it was supposed to be in the first place. The media picked up the story. Nashville contractor donates mansion to domestic violence shelter. They didn't know the full story, the lottery, the betrayal, the gender reveal that turned into an execution. They just knew a wealthy man had done something generous. I didn't correct them. The truth was too personal, too raw. On the day of the final hearings, Paige and I stood outside the courthouse watching through the windows as Preston and Celeste sat in their separate courtrooms, signing papers that severed them from a family they'd never truly valued. Celeste looked smaller, somehow diminished. Without the perfect clothes and jewelry and status she'd craved, she was just a woman who'd gambled on betrayal and lost. She was moving to Memphis to live with her sister, who'd made it clear the arrangement was temporary and unwelcome. Preston looked scared. Signing away his parental rights meant walking away from fraud charges, but also walking away from any protection from those dangerous people he owed. I heard later he'd moved to Atlanta, then disappeared. Maybe he found a way to pay his debts. Maybe he didn't. I didn't care enough to find out. When is it over? Paige asked, watching them through the glass. The legal part, yes. The rest. I put my arm around her shoulders. The rest takes time. She leaned against me, one hand on her belly where her daughter kicked. Justice doesn't always feel like I thought it would. What does it feel like? Like freedom, she said softly. Just freedom to start over, cleanly. Justice, I thought, watching them sign away their rights doesn't always look like revenge. Sometimes it just looks like freedom. The freedom to begin again without the weight of lies holding you down. 10 weeks after the gender reveal party that turned our world upside down, right on her due date, Paige went into labor at 3:47 on a Tuesday morning. I'd been sleeping lightly for days waiting for this moment. Her room was just down the hall from mine, and I heard her gasp, heard the shuffle of feet, then her voice calling out softly, "Dad, Dad, it's time." I was dressed and moving before I was fully awake. Found her in the hallway, one hand braced against the wall, the other cradling her belly. Her face was pale but determined. How far apart are the contractions? 6 minutes. I've been timing them for the past hour. Why didn't you wake me sooner? I wanted to be sure. She managed a small smile. Khan didn't want to drag you to the hospital for false labor. I grabbed her hospital bag packed and ready by the door for 2 weeks and helped her to the truck. Called Howard and Lauren on the way. By the time we pulled up to Vanderbilt Medical Center at 4:15, they were already in the parking lot waiting. How's she doing? Lauren asked, taking Paige's other arm as we walked toward the entrance. She's tough, I said, watching my daughter breathe through another contraction. Always has been. The labor was long. Hours that stretched into an eternity, watching Paige endure pain I couldn't fix or share. Lauren stayed by her side the whole time, coaching her breathing, holding her hand, being the support she needed. Howard and I waited in the hallway, pacing, drinking terrible hospital coffee, not saying much. You doing okay, boss? Howard asked around noon. Just thinking about all the ways this could have gone differently. If I hadn't stopped for gas that day. If I hadn't bought that lottery ticket. If I'd never found out the truth. You think she's better off not knowing? I watched through the small window as Lauren helped Paige shift positions as my daughter's face contorted with another contraction. No, Truth always wins in the end. Lies might feel comfortable for a while, but they rot everything from the inside. Better to tear the house down and rebuild on solid ground than keep living in something that's falling apart. At 5:17 that evening, after 13 and a half hours of labor, I heard a sound that changed everything. A cry thin and sharp and absolutely perfect, the cry of a newborn taking her first breath. "It's a girl!" The nurse called out, though we'd known that for months. But hearing it now in this moment made it real in a way the pink confetti never had. A few minutes later, the door opened. The nurse appeared holding a tiny bundle wrapped in a hospital blanket. She looked at Paige, then at me. "The mother says grandfather holds her first," she said with a warm smile. I looked at Paige through the doorway. She was exhausted, sweaty tears streaming down her face. But she was smiling, the first real smile I'd seen since that terrible afternoon in the garden. She nodded at me. My hands were shaking as I reached for the baby. The nurse placed her carefully in my arms, adjusting my hold, making sure I supported her head properly. And then I was looking down at my granddaughter for the first time. She was so small, perfect tiny features, a dusting of dark hair, eyes squeezed shut against the bright hospital lights. Her little fingers were curled into fists, and when I touched one gently, those tiny fingers opened and closed around my rough, calloused index finger, holding on with surprising strength. "Hello, sweetheart," I whispered, my voice breaking. "I'm your papa. I'm so glad you're here." The tears came then, the kind I'd been holding back for weeks. Happy tears this time, not the grief and rage and betrayal that had fueled me through the revelation and its aftermath. These were different, pure and clean and full of hope. "She's beautiful, Paige," I called into the room. "She's absolutely perfect." They let me hold her for a few more minutes before taking her back to Paige. I watched through the window as my daughter held her baby for the first time, watched Paige's face transform with wonder and love and fierce protectiveness. Lauren came out a few minutes later, wiping her own tears. "She wants you to come in now." I walked into the recovery room. Paige was propped up in bed, the baby cradled against her chest, and the look on her face was something I'd carry with me for the rest of my life. Despite everything she'd been through, the betrayal, the devastation, the collapse of everything, she thought she knew she was whole again. Different than before, but whole. "Dad, meet Emma Grace Wade," Paige said softly. Wade, not Garrett. My name. The name I'd built my life on, the name that meant something solid and true. "You're giving her my name." "She's ours, Dad. Wade is who we are. It's the family she belongs to, not Preston's, not Mom's. Ours." I sat carefully on the edge of the bed, looking down at this tiny person who represented both the worst and best of humanity. Born from lies and betrayal, carried through pain and revelation, but held now in unconditional love. "Emma Grace," I said, testing the name. "It's perfect. She's perfect." "I couldn't have done this without you," Paige said quietly. "The party, the truth, all of it. I know it was hard choosing to hurt me in the short term to protect me in the long term, but you saved me, Dad. You saved both of us." I couldn't speak past the lump in my throat. Just reached out and gently touched Emma's tiny hand, marveled at how something so small could be so complete. That night, after Paige and Emma were settled, after the visitors had gone and the hospital had quieted for the evening, I stood at the nursery window looking at my granddaughter through the glass. She lay in her bassinet, swaddled tight, sleeping peacefully, while monitors tracked her tiny heartbeat. Born from betrayal, carried through pain, but embraced now in unconditional love. And I understood looking at her that this was the construction project that would outlast everything else I'd ever built. Not houses or mansions or businesses, but family. Family built not on blood or obligation, but on love that chose to stay. Love that chose truth over comfortable lies. Love that rebuilt on solid ground instead of settling for a beautiful facade. Emma Grace Wade, my granddaughter, my legacy, the best thing I never planned to build. 6 months after Emma was born, I woke to the sound I'd grown to love most in this world, her babbling through the baby monitor, my favorite alarm clock. 5:30 a.m., same as always. But instead of heading straight to a job site like I'd done for 40 years, I padded down the hall to the nursery. Paige's old bedroom transformed with a crib Howard had helped me build. Walls painted soft yellow curtains Paige had sewn herself during her 3rd trimester. Emma was standing in her crib, holding onto the rails, bouncing on chubby legs that were getting stronger every day. When she saw me, her whole face lit up. Papa. Not quite clear yet, more like Baba, but close enough to make my heart swell every single time. "Good morning, sunshine," I said, scooping her up. She smelled like baby shampoo and that indefinable sweetness that only infants have. "Let's go see if Mama's awake yet." Paige was already in the kitchen making coffee. At 6 months postpartum, she looked more like herself. Not the girl she'd been before Preston, but someone stronger, more certain. Her hair was pulled back in a messy bun, she wore yoga pants, and one of my old construction company t-shirts, and she'd never looked more beautiful. "Morning, Dad," she said, taking Emma from me and settling her in the high chair. "Sleep okay?" "Like a rock. You come?" Emma only woke up once. "We're getting there." She started preparing Emma's breakfast, mashed banana and oatmeal. "I have a potential client call at 10. The interior design consultation I told you about." After Emma was born, Paige had started slowly rebuilding her professional life. Not going back to her old job, too many memories, too many people who knew about Preston, but starting something new. Interior design consulting, working from home, building a business on her own terms. "That's the couple in Brentwood." "Yeah, they want help with their nursery." She smiled a little sadly. "Ironic, right? But I figured I learned a lot about what matters in a nursery. Might as well help other people get it right." Over breakfast, Emma in her high chair making a cheerful mess, Paige drinking coffee, me reading the paper. I thought about how different our life looked now compared to 6 months ago. How different it looked compared to the life I'd imagined 30 years ago when I married Celeste. The lottery money had been distributed exactly as I'd planned, just with different beneficiaries. 50 million went into an irrevocable trust for Emma, accessible when she turned 25. Enough to give her security without robbing her of ambition. 30 million went to various charities. Haven House got the largest chunk along with the mansion. The remaining 20 million was split between me and Paige, though most of mine went into growing Wade construction and securing retirement. We weren't flashy rich. We didn't move to a bigger house or buy luxury cars. Paige drove a sensible Honda SUV, safe and practical for a baby. I still had my truck, though I'd finally replaced the one with 300,000 miles on it. The house in Donaldson was paid off, modest but comfortable, filled now with baby gear and the kind of chaos that comes with a 6-month-old. The community had wrapped around us in ways I never expected. Miguel's wife, Rosa, brought food every Sunday, homemade tamales, enchiladas, rice, and beans. For the new mama, she'd say, refusing to take no for an answer. Barbara Sullivan came by every Tuesday to watch Emma while Paige worked on her business plan. The construction crew had shown up one Saturday unannounced and built out the nursery, new drywall, fresh paint, custom shelving, refusing any payment. "A family takes care of family," Miguel had said, echoing my own words back to me. "And your family, Jefe." Celeste and Preston were gone. Completely, finally gone. Celeste had moved to Memphis, though I'd heard through Barbara that she'd since left Tennessee entirely, somewhere out west, Phoenix maybe. She'd sent one letter about 2 months after Emma was born. I'd burned it without reading past the first line. Some doors once closed should stay that way. Preston had disappeared more completely. Last anyone heard, he'd left Atlanta in a hurry. Whether he'd settled his debts with those dangerous people or was still running, I didn't know and didn't care. He'd signed away. His rights walked away from his daughter and ceased to exist in our lives. Good riddance to both of them. That afternoon, while Emma napped and Paige was on her consultation call, I sat on the back porch with my coffee. The yard was small but well kept. Howard and I had built a play set last month ready for when Emma was old enough to use it. Paige had planted flowers along the fence, was talking about putting in a vegetable garden in the spring. Howard's truck pulled up around 2. He'd been stopping by most afternoons, helping with projects, checking on us. More than an employee or friend, he was family in the truest sense of the word. "How's my favorite niece doing?" he asked, though Emma wasn't technically his niece. "She's perfect, smart as a whip already. Definitely got her mama's brains. And her papa's stubborn streak." Paige called from inside, making us both laugh. That evening after dinner, the 3 of us sat on the porch as the sun set over Nashville. Emma was in my arms fighting sleep but losing the battle. Paige sat beside me in the old rocking chair I'd bought when she was born, the one Celeste had insisted we replace with something more tasteful. "Dad," Paige said quietly, "are you happy? Really happy? I know this isn't the retirement you planned, helping raise your granddaughter, dealing with all my drama." "Stop," I interrupted gently. "This is exactly where I want to be. This," I gestured at Emma at the modest house at Paige beside me. "This is everything that matters. Even after everything you lost, I didn't lose anything worth keeping. I traded a big house full of lies for a small house full of truth. That's not a loss, sweetheart. That's the best deal I ever made." Emma finally fell asleep in my arms, her tiny hand curled around my finger like she'd done the day she was born. Paige rested her head on my shoulder, and we sat there in the gathering dusk, listening to crickets, watching the stars emerge. Life didn't look like I'd imagined 30 years ago when I married Celeste, when I dreamed of building an empire. It looked smaller, quieter, more modest, but every moment felt real. Every laugh, every hug, every "I love you" meant exactly what it said. And that I'd learned made all the difference in the world. That evening, after putting Emma down in her crib, Paige and I brought peach tea out to the porch and settled into the rocking chairs under stars that were just beginning to appear. The crickets were singing their evening song. Emma's baby monitor sat on the small table between us, transmitting the soft sound of her sleeping breaths. "Dad," Paige said after a while, her voice quiet, "can I ask you something? Anything, sweetheart. Do you hate her mom, I mean? After everything she did, do you hate her?" I took a long drink of tea, considered carefully. "I'm angry. I'm hurt. But hate? No, I don't hate her." "How?" Paige's voice cracked. "Why, she called you stupid. She spent 30 years lying to you." "Because hate would let her take even more from me than she already has," I said. "Hate eats you from the inside out. Your mother made her choices. She has to live with the consequences. But I don't have to carry that weight." "I'm still so angry," Paige admitted. "Every day. Sometimes I look at Emma and I'm furious that Mom will never know her. That's her loss, not ours. She traded something real for something hollow." Paige was quiet for a moment. "What if Emma looks like him, Preston? What if she has his eyes?" "Stop," I interrupted gently. "Emma might have Preston's eyes or his hair. Genetics are genetics. But she'll have your heart, your kindness, your strength. Love builds a family, not DNA." "You really believe that?" "I know that. Howard isn't blood, but he's more family than Celeste ever was. Barbara has been more of a mother to you these past 6 months than your actual mother was in 29 years. Family is what we choose. It's who shows up, who stays, who loves you when everything falls apart. Paige wiped her eyes. I worry that I wasted so much of your life. You could have retired, traveled. Instead, you're helping raise your granddaughter because I married the wrong man. Hey. I reached over and took her hand. Those 30 years with your mother gave me you. And you gave me Emma. If I had to go through all of it again, the lies, the betrayal, the pain to get to this moment, right here, I'd do it in a heartbeat. Really. Really. You and Emma, you're worth everything. We heard Howard's truck pull up. He came around carrying a 6-pack of beer and wearing that easy grin. Room for one more on this porch. Always, I said. He settled into the third chair, handed me a beer, offered one to Paige, who declined. Emma asleep? Out cold, Paige said. She had a big day, discovered her toes. Howard laughed, and that's a milestone worth celebrating. We sat together, 3 people who'd been through hell and come out the other side, the family we'd chosen to build from the wreckage. You know what's funny? Paige said after a while. 6 months ago, I thought my life was perfect. Beautiful house husband, I loved, baby on the way. And it was all a lie. Now I'm living in a 3-bedroom house in Donaldson. I'm a single mother, half my family turned out to be con artists. And somehow, I'm happier now. Because it's real, Howard said simply. And real is always better than perfect. Even when real is messy and hard. Especially then, I said. Perfect is just a pretty lie. Real is what you can build on. Later, after Howard left and Paige went to bed, I stayed on the porch alone. The stars were fully out now. Through the baby monitor, I could hear Emma's soft breathing. I thought about the man I'd been 30 years ago, believing that success meant big houses and impressing people. I'd built all of that, and it had all been hollow underneath. Now I lived in a modest house with my daughter and granddaughter. I worked less, spent more time on this porch. My empire was smaller, quieter, invisible to anyone who measured success by square footage. But every inch of it was real. Every relationship was built on truth. Every "I love you" meant exactly what it said. I'd spent my whole life building structures that would last decades, solid foundations, straight walls, roofs that weathered every storm. But my greatest construction wasn't made of brick or stone. It was built on choices. The choice to love a granddaughter whose father had betrayed me. The choice to protect a daughter when her mother abandoned her. The choice to turn a lottery jackpot into a foundation for truth. 6 months after the party that shattered my world, I sat on a porch in Nashville listening to my granddaughter's gentle breathing. The calloused hands that once built empires now rocked a cradle. And that was the greatest construction of all. Not what you build when everything's perfect, but what you choose to build when everything's broken. Looking back now, I can finally admit something that took me 30 years to face. I ignored the truth because I was afraid of what it would cost me. I told myself I was being loyal, patient, strong. In reality, I was choosing comfort over honesty. I overlooked the small signs, the lack of respect, the quiet contempt, the way my worth was measured only by what I could provide. I thought love meant enduring anything. I was wrong. If there is one thing I hope you learn from my family story, it's this: don't confuse sacrifice with silence. Love should never require you to shrink, to close your eyes, or to betray your own intuition. When something feels wrong for a long time, it usually is. Don't wait like I did for a dramatic moment to force the truth into the open. By then, the damage is already deep. Here's my advice: don't be like me. Don't assume time will fix what honesty refuses to face. Don't believe that working harder will earn respect from someone who never intended to give it. And don't think that loyalty means tolerating betrayal. Real loyalty protects what is right, not what is convenient. That lesson cost me my marriage, but it saved my daughter and my granddaughter. I want to be clear about something. This was never about revenge. Yes, some people call what I did dad revenge, but that word doesn't tell the full truth. What I chose was justice, not destruction. Revenge is loud, emotional, and empty. Justice is quiet, deliberate, and freeing. That distinction matters more than most people realize. Let me say this plainly, money didn't save me. Winning a fortune didn't make me strong. What saved me was the moment I stopped lying to myself. I believe God allows truth to surface when we are finally strong enough to carry it. He didn't remove the pain from my path, but He gave me the clarity to walk through it without losing myself. A few short truths I stand by now. Respect is not optional in love. Silence protects the wrong people. Children deserve truth more than appearances. And no amount of money can repair a life built on lies. This family story didn't end the way I imagined when I was younger, but it ended on something solid. I lost a wife who never truly saw me, and I gained peace. I lost an illusion of family, and I gained a real one. That trade was worth everything. Some people still label this as dad revenge, but I see it differently now. It was a reset, a line drawn, a refusal to pass lies down to the next generation. And if my story helps even one person question what they're tolerating, then the pain had meaning. So if you're listening to this and something feels familiar, pause. Look honestly at your own family story. Ask yourself if you're staying out of love or out of fear. Ask yourself who truly stands with you when there's nothing left to give. This isn't about winning. It's about choosing truth before it's too late. That choice changed everything for me. That's the real dad revenge, not hurting others, but refusing to let lies define your future. And yes, that choice can save more than just you. It can save the people you love most. If this story resonated with you, I invite you to leave a comment below and share your thoughts. Feel free to like the video and subscribe to the channel if these stories speak to you. Your support truly matters and helps this community grow. Thank you sincerely for staying with me until the very end. And a gentle reminder before you go: upcoming stories may include fictionalized elements created for educational and reflective purposes. If that's not what you're looking for, you're always free to exit and choose content that feels right for you.